Hello dear audience. Waving hand. Today we have just followed a very gentle yet emotional story about Hana and CEO Tuan. From a simple empty piece of land, the two of them worked together to build a new house, not just a structure made of bricks, but a place filled with connection, sharing, and sincere care between two people. During the process, they faced the sun, fatigue, and the challenges of construction work together. But what makes the story truly special are the everyday yet heartwarming moments. CEO Tuan quietly helping Hana, taking care of her when she was tired, and gently wiping her sweat under the hot sun. These small actions carry deep affection, making their relationship grow closer and more meaningful. This is not only a story about building a house, but also a journey of building trust, understanding, and unspoken emotions between two people walking side by side. If you enjoy gentle, warm, and emotional stories like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and share the video to support us. Bell. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next meaningful and heartwarming story. Early in the morning, the farm was wrapped in a soft, golden mist. The sun had just begun to rise, casting gentle rays over the wide, open land where Hana and CEO Tuan stood side by side. The air was fresh, filled with the scent of soil and grass, as if nature itself was quietly blessing their decision. In front of them lay an empty piece of land, simple, untouched, and full of potential. But to both of them, it was not just land. It was the beginning of something meaningful, something they had both silently wished for without ever fully speaking it aloud. Hana held a set of rolled-up blueprints in her hands. Her fingers tightened slightly as she looked at the space in front of her, imagining what it could become. There was excitement in her eyes, but also a sense of calm determination. This was not just about building a house. It was about building a place where life could be lived slowly, peacefully, and honestly. A place where mornings would begin with light laughter, and evenings would end with quiet understanding. Beside her, CEO Tuan stood with his hands resting casually on his hips. Unlike his usual appearance in formal meetings and corporate environments, today he looked different, more relaxed, more human. He observed the land carefully, scanning every corner as if already visualizing the structure that would soon rise from it. Occasionally, he glanced at Hana, noticing the way her expression changed every time she looked at the blueprint. There was something soft in his gaze, something unspoken yet steady. "Here," Hana finally said, pointing to a specific area on the ground. "This should be the main structure. If we align it with the sunlight, the living room will always be bright in the morning." CEO Tuan nodded thoughtfully. "And if we extend the porch slightly to the east, we can create a shaded space in the afternoon. It will be perfect for rest." Their conversation flowed naturally, without formality or hesitation. It was as if they had done this many times before, though in reality, this was the first time they were building something together like this. Every idea was discussed, adjusted, and refined with mutual respect. There was no hierarchy between them in this moment, only two people working toward the same vision. As they began marking the land, Hana carefully bent down to place wooden stakes into the soil. The ground was slightly damp from the previous night's dew, making it easier to dig. CEO Tuan followed closely, measuring distances with precision. The sound of tools gently tapping against wood filled the quiet morning, blending with the distant chirping of birds. At one point, Hana stepped back to review their markings. A small smile appeared on her face as she saw how their ideas were slowly taking shape, even in this earliest stage. It was simple, almost fragile, but it was real. CEO Tuan noticed her expression and paused for a moment. For him, this was more than just a construction project. It was something personal, something that carried weight beyond business or responsibility. Watching Hana stand there with quiet joy made him feel a sense of peace he rarely experienced in his busy world. The empty land no longer felt empty. Even though no walls had been built yet, something invisible had already begun to form between them, a shared understanding, a silent promise, and the foundation of something far deeper than bricks and cement. As the sun climbed higher into the sky, the peaceful morning gradually turned into a warm and demanding midday. The gentle breeze that had once cooled the land faded, replaced by a steady heat that settled over the construction site. Yet Hana and CEO Tuan continued working without hesitation. The dream they had begun earlier was no longer just a vision on paper, it was slowly becoming something real, something they could touch, carry, and build with their own hands. The first delivery of materials arrived shortly after morning planning. Wooden beams, stacks of bricks, cement bags, and metal tools were carefully unloaded near the site. Instead of calling for a large team, Hana insisted on being involved in every step, and surprisingly, CEO Tuan agreed without argument. For him, this was not about convenience or efficiency. It was about experience, about sharing something meaningful with Hana from the very foundation upward. Hana quickly rolled up her sleeves, tying her hair back as she prepared to help move the lighter materials. Despite her determination, it was clear that the physical labor was not easy for her. The weight of the wooden planks was heavier than expected, and after several trips back and forth, small beads of sweat began forming on her forehead. Still, she did not stop. There was a quiet stubbornness in her actions, a desire to contribute equally. CEO Tuan noticed this almost immediately. Without saying much, he stepped closer and took some of the heavier materials from her hands. "Let me handle this part," he said calmly, his tone firm but not cold. Hana opened her mouth to protest, but he simply shook his head slightly, already lifting the load himself. There was no need for further discussion between them, an unspoken understanding had already formed. As they continued working, the rhythm of construction slowly took over. The sound of hammering wood, the scraping of tools, and the steady movement of materials filled the air. Time seemed to stretch and flow differently in that space. It was not rushed, yet it was not idle either. Everything moved with purpose. By midday, the heat became more intense. The sun stood directly above them, casting sharp shadows on the ground. Hana paused for a moment, stepping back to catch her breath. She wiped her forehead with the back of her hand, trying to ignore the fatigue creeping into her arms and shoulders. CEO Tuan, who had been fastening a wooden frame nearby, looked up and immediately noticed her condition. Without a word, he walked over, reached into his pocket, and pulled out a clean handkerchief. Hana looked at him slightly surprised, not expecting such a simple yet thoughtful gesture. Before she could react, he gently stepped closer and wiped the sweat from her temple and forehead. His movements were careful, almost instinctive, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. Hana froze for a moment. The noise of construction around them seemed to fade, leaving only the quiet presence between them. It was not an extravagant gesture, nor was it spoken with dramatic emotion. Yet it carried a warmth that was deeply felt. She lowered her gaze slightly, unsure how to respond, while a faint blush appeared on her cheeks. CEO Tuan, noticing her reaction, simply stepped back and placed the handkerchief back into his pocket. "We should take a short break," he said casually, as if nothing unusual had happened. They both sat down under the shade of a nearby tree, the coolness offering relief from the heat. Around them, the half-built structure stood quietly, reflecting their progress. Though tired, neither of them felt regret. Instead, there was a shared sense of accomplishment, as if every drop of sweat had meaning. In that moment, their work was no longer just about building a house. It had become something deeper, a process of understanding, support, and silent care woven into every brick they placed together. When the midday heat finally softened into a gentler afternoon breeze, Hana and CEO Tuan stepped away from the construction site and walked toward a large tree that stood a short distance from the unfinished house. The shade beneath its branches offered a welcome relief, cooler and calmer than the sunlit field they had been working in for hours. The sound of wind brushing through leaves replaced the noise of tools and wood, creating a peaceful contrast that felt almost surreal after the intensity of their labor. Hana slowly lowered herself onto a wooden log placed beneath the tree. Her movements were a little slower now, her energy clearly drained from the long hours of physical work. She exhaled softly, tilting her head back for a moment as she tried to relax her tense shoulders. A few strands of hair had come loose from her tied-up style, gently sticking to her slightly damp skin. Despite her exhaustion, there was a quiet satisfaction in her expression, as if she was proud of what they had achieved so far. CEO Tuan stood nearby for a moment, watching her silently. His usual composed demeanor softened as he observed the small signs of fatigue on her face. Without saying anything, he walked a step closer and took out a clean handkerchief from his pocket again. Hana noticed his movement but did not speak, as if instinctively understanding what he was about to do. He gently stepped beside her and raised his hand. With careful, unhurried motions, he wiped the remaining sweat from her forehead and temples. His actions were calm and precise, yet carried an undeniable tenderness. There was no hesitation, no awkwardness, only a quiet sense of care that felt natural between them in that moment. The world around them seemed to slow down, as if giving space for this small gesture to exist without interruption. Hana remained still, her eyes slightly widened at first, then slowly softened. She did not pull away. Instead, she allowed the moment to settle, feeling the unexpected warmth in such a simple act. Her heart, though not loudly expressive, stirred in a way she could not easily put into words. She lowered her gaze slightly, a faint smile forming at the corners of her lips, though she tried to hide it. When he finished, CEO Tuan stepped back and sat down beside her, maintaining a respectful distance but staying close enough that their presence still felt connected. He looked ahead at the half-built structure in the distance, its wooden frame standing quietly under the afternoon light. "We've done more than I expected today," he said softly, breaking the silence. Hana nodded slowly. "It's starting to feel real now," she replied, her voice calm but filled with quiet emotion. They sat there for a while without speaking further. The silence between them was not empty, it was comfortable, filled with shared understanding. The wind continued to move through the field, carrying the scent of wood, soil, and sunlight. In that quiet space, something unspoken deepened between them. It was not declared, not defined, but it was present in the smallest details, the way they worked together, the way they looked after each other without being asked, and the way silence itself felt meaningful when they were side by side. The house they were building was still far from complete, just a frame against the open land. But in that moment, it no longer felt like the only thing being built. Alongside the structure of wood and stone, something more delicate was forming between Hana and CEO Tuan, a connection shaped not by grand words, but by shared effort, quiet care, and moments that would stay in memory long after the day ended.